Hi everybody. I hope you had a nice Monday. I did. It's Maria from Still Dreaming Homestead, and it's time to read out of our book again, The Hair Pulling Bear Dog. So, would you like to see my dog for a minute? Let me see if I can show you my dog. Hi Ruby. This is my dog. She's not a hair puller. She's a German Shepherd. Do any of you have dogs? And if so, what kind do you have? Okay, now I think I'm all comfortable and ready to read. We're on chapter 3 today. So let me find it. And it's called A Defender for the Outlaw Bear. A defender. Defender is someone who protects. So let's see what this has to say. Mrs. Higgins said, "Why, Sam, Dillon, and DJ, what a surprise to see you." She didn't open the screen door, which was most unusual. But Dad didn't seem to notice. "Hannah, we've been hit by the outlaw bear. So we traded for some hounds." "Mercy, a bear?" The way Mrs. Higgins said it, the bear might have been coming right down the street. DJ wondered why she was so nervous. He saw her turn her head slightly and look behind her. 9-year-old Priscilla Higgins came up behind her mother and looked through the screen door at DJ. She made a face at him. Was that nice? Her hair was brown, just like her eyes, but the hair looked like an eagle's nest that had fallen on a fence post. It was the only untidy thing about her, so her hair was all messed up. DJ made sure his dad and Mrs. Higgins weren't looking. Then he made a face back at Pris. But Dad looked down and caught DJ. As always, Dad dropped a powerful hand right on the boy's shoulder. My dog's going crazy. And gave him a warning look. DJ caught the fragrance of fried chicken and apple cobbler. Mrs. Higgins was getting supper, but she didn't invite the unexpected visitors inside. DJ heard heavy footsteps inside the living room. A giant of a man appeared behind Mrs. Higgins. DJ caught the rumble of a mighty voice in a big chest as the stranger spoke. "Did I hear someone mention bears?" DJ saw Mrs. Higgins' hands fluttered nervously. She stammered, yes, Sam, this here is, well, he's a friend of old Ms. Talbot's from the church. She asked him to stop by. Paul, this is Sam Dillon, and his boy DJ." The giant pushed the screen door open and extended a right hand the size of a big picnic hand. That is, would be like this big. I'm not sure if his hand really was that big. And he said, "Howdy, Sam. I'm Paul Stagg. New to town. Mighty proud to know you." Sam Dillon ignored the outstretched hand. His forehead wrinkled, and he glanced quickly at the widow. She was very upset, twisting her flower yellow apron in both hands. She's just twisting. DJ figured his dad was upset at finding a stranger here. The giant didn't seem to notice Dad ignoring his hand. The stranger bent and shook DJ's hand. DJ, is it? It's really David Jonathan, but my friends call me DJ. Mighty good Bible names, especially David. You know, David in the Bible fought bears and lions when he wasn't much older than your age. Sam, did you know that when you and your missus named your son? DJ's eyes followed the giant as he stood upright again and faced Dad. The boy was reminded of a little banty rooster facing a 16 hands high stallion. Paul Stagg was about 6'4". That's very tall. He wore polished, sandal-colored, so sandal would be maybe brown, cowboy boots, and held a white 10-gallon Stetson. That's like a cowboy hat. With boots and hat, DJ figured the man was 7 foot tall. His hair was reddish. He wore an old but clean cowboy shirt and blue jeans. DJ figured the giant was about the nicest looking man he'd ever seen. DJ had made a mistake in taking his eyes off Pris. She had slipped out of the house and kicked him sharply right on the shin. The shin is below your knee, the front part of that leg below your knee, as the two men looked at each other. Ouch! DJ exclaimed. Everybody looked at him. Pris was looking innocent as an angel in church. Her brown eyes were watching a bee working on a red flower growing on the porch rail. Bumped my leg, DJ lied, rubbing the spot. The giant said heartily, Sam, did you hear? Did I hear you say something about a bear? Sam Dillon was still suspicious. You ever hunt them? Hunted them all my life until recently. Dad's anger vanished. It just disappeared. His face broke into a smile and he reached out his right hand. Well now, howdy, Paul. I sure admire meeting up with another bear hunter. The big man grinned and stuck out his right hand. But before their hands touched, Pris piped up, Brother Paul's our new preacher. Dad snatched his hand back as fast as if he had been snake bit. Preacher? Dad exploded. Lay preacher, the giant rumbled. He kept his big hand sticking out toward Dad. Paul Stagg didn't seem to notice Dad's tone. I got a call to come reopen the community church here. But in my hunting days, I took 40 bears by myself and was in on hunts where another 40 bears or so were taken. DJ was surprised at how his dad's manner changed. He reached out his right hand and gripped Paul Stagg's heartily. And so a good strong handshake. DJ knew Dad was probably squeezing hard. He was such a short man that anybody who stood head and shoulders above him always made Dad try to show off his great strength. Where'd you hunt, Paul? Dad asked, pumping the preacher's hand. DJ saw the widow sigh and smile. She invited the Dillons, come on in, and indicated seats. Dad headed for his favorite wing-back chair, which had been Pris's father's, but the giant beat him to it. The preacher didn't seem to notice as he called toward the kitchen. I have to pause. The preacher didn't seem to notice as he called toward the kitchen. Kathy, can you come out here a minute? I want you to meet some friends of Mrs. Higgins and her daughter. DJ had started to sit down on the footstool when a girl, about 12, entered the room. She was very slender and already tall for her age. She dried her hands of the red apron as Paul Stagg said, "Gentlemen, this here's my daughter, Kathy. Been helping in the kitchen." DJ briefly met the girl's blue eyes. Her hair was reddish, like her father's, and she had zillions of freckles. DJ said, "Hi," and she answered the same way. She gave him and Dad the biggest smile DJ had ever seen. "Excuse me," she said. "I'm helping with the supper." She returned to the kitchen. Dad asked, "Mrs. Stagg in the kitchen too?" The preacher said, "No. Her father took sick and she went to help him out a while. She'll be back with us pretty soon, I reckon. Kathy'll go to school here this fall while I pastor for a while. Your missus with you, Sam?" "My wife died last winter." The giant reached out and touched Dad gently on the arm. "I'm right sorry, Sam." Mrs. Higgins broke in. "Paul's brother is visiting all the people, inviting them to Sunday services. That's why he came here." She spoke directly at Sam Dillon. "The church has been closed since the last supper, the last supply pastor, left months ago. Now we'll have regular services again." The preacher's voice rumbled up from deep in his throat. "You're all welcome anytime. Sure do hope you'll come next Sunday. Say, David, speaking of bears, you want to hear a bear story?" "Sure would," DJ replied, looking up and smiling. "But you can call me DJ." Mrs. Higgins said, "DJ's going to be a writer when he grows up. Writes books and things. Maybe he can use your story in a book someday, Brother Paul." "Well, he's welcome to it if he wants." DJ leaned forward, and suddenly, very glad he was that he had met this man. He sure hoped his father would be nice to the preacher. Paul Staggs crossed his legs, leaned back in the chair, and tossed his white cowboy hat over the shiny brown boot toe. Put it on the toe of his boot. "The trouble with telling bear stories," he said, hooking his hands behind his head, "is that I gotta get warmed up. You that way too, Sam?" Dad shrugged and answered, "I don't tell many stories anymore." Paul grinned, a wide, friendly grin that seemed to light up the whole room. "Now, you know it's true a preacher won't lie, but like a fisherman, some bear hunters are known to stretch the truth plumb out of shape. Why, once I was telling a bear story to a man I'd met while two of my own hunting partners, Jake and Fred, was listening. When I finished up, Jake said, 'Paul, I wished I'd been on that hunt.' Fred punched Jake in the ribs and said, 'Hush up, you was.'" Everyone laughed. DJ could see the big man was warming up. Paul continued, "People are always asking me about the biggest bear I ever saw. Well, we run this old bear all day, but lost him somewhere about sundown. So we found an old vacant cabin and stayed all night because it was pretty cold. Well, sir, along in the night I heard this scratching on the window. Window would be a window. I got up, took a flashlight, and shined it towards the sound. There was a bear looking in the window with a head so big it looked like a bushel basket. That'd be like a laundry basket. Well, it was too cold and I was too tired to do anything about it, so I crawled back into bed. I didn't think much about it until I happened to remember I was sleeping upstairs. You think that you'd be upstairs in a house and could look out a window and look a bear in the eyes? That'd be a mighty big bear. Everyone exploded with laughter. That's crazy. DJ noticed that even his dad joined in. He seemed to have forgotten about Tinsley Abbott and nails. Dad got in the mood and began telling stories. Mrs. Higgins laughed with relief, patted DJ on the head, and said supper would soon be ready. She went into the kitchen while the men continued to swap bear stories. DJ listened to them talk about the outlaw bear. DJ spoke up and told about the lump he'd seen in the outlaw's jaw. Pa nodded. Don't you know that old bear must be really hurting from a bad tooth or a sore jaw, maybe even a gunshot wound? Dad said, most likely the outlaw that hit us can't eat natural food anymore. Hunger's driven him down to people's country where there's garbage and turkey mash and little pigs called shoats, like ours. Pain makes the bear mean, and he might hurt somebody. The men agreed bears usually don't bother humans unless those people come upon a sow, which is a mama bear, with cubs. Paul said the greatest danger was in hunting through rough terrain or with unfamiliar dogs. DJ glanced at Dad to see if he'd say anything about that, but the giant said something about a famous old bear named Ephraim. This bear had roamed all over California and Nevada, and some folks said even as far as Utah. Somebody was supposed to have killed the bear in the high country and marked the spot as Ephraim's grave. Dad admitted he'd heard that story, but he never really had learned if it was true. DJ asked Paul why Paul had quit hunting bears. The giant looked at the boy and smiled. My daughter made me do it, more or less. She doesn't hold to killing things, especially bears. Says California's someday going to declare they're a valuable natural resource and not varmints, as they've always been. Kathy says bears will be protected by the law, and you'll not be able to keep a cub, as I once did, or hunt without a license, and then only certain periods or seasons when it's legal to hunt. Dad cussed, which is saying bad words, softly, blaming the government for interfering in a man's private business. DJ knew Dad cussed so often since Mom had died, he didn't even notice what he had said, and in front of the preacher too. DJ wondered if Mom was right. Would God someday touch Dad and Grandpa both and change their hearts? Supper! Mrs. Higgins came out of the kitchen and indicated where she wanted each person to sit. When all 6 were seated, she said, "I've had a Christian upbringing, but Sam doesn't care much for such things, Brother Paul. I know where you stand, so anybody as wants to return thanks can." That would be to say grace or to say your prayers before you eat. Anybody who don't want to doesn't have to. Dad nodded and reached for the mashed potatoes. DJ watched the preacher, his daughter, Mrs. Higgins, and Pris bow their heads. But DJ saw Mrs. Higgins keep her eyes open so she didn't miss a move of Dad's arm. She was ready when he passed her the potatoes. DJ and Pris looked at each other. In all the times the boy and his father had eaten supper there, nothing ever had been said about returning thanks. DJ had a funny feeling that the bear hunter turned preacher was going to make a difference somehow. Conversation died down while everyone ate. Conversation is when you're talking to each other, and when you're eating, you can't talk so good. DJ found himself wanting to know more about the bear hunter and his daughter. Once DJ had caught Kathy's bright blue eyes on him, and he felt his face grow warm. DJ swallowed the last of his second piece of chicken. "Paul, were you always a preacher?" "Not hardly, son. I was born in Oklahoma and grew up with a meanness to fight and such like. But my mother kept a praying for me. And one night I went down to the local brush arbor and I got right with the Lord. Had a call to preach, but didn't have no regular learning. So I've just been traveling around lay preaching." That's when a person will preach that is not a regular pastor. "So I've just been traveling around. Heard the local church here was closed, so I come and opened it with the help of fine people like Mrs. Higgins here." DJ got so interested he forgot Pris until he felt a hard kick on his shin. "Ouch!" he cried, looking at Pris. She was innocently looking the other way. Dad demanded angrily, "DJ, what's the matter with you?" DJ lied again. "Bumped my knee on the table." "Well," Dad said, "maybe you won't bump into anything twice if you're in the kitchen helping with the dishes after supper." Mrs. Higgins protested, but Dad was firm. "DJ'll be glad to do that, and your little Pris can rest." Paul said, "Kathy'll be glad to help, won't you, hun?" She nodded and got up from the table to clear it. DJ stood and helped. The adults started talking. The boy saw Pris peeking out from under her eagle's nest of a hair, where it was all messed up. She gave him a smug look. He wanted to get even with her, but there was no way. With what a little pest she was. But Dad had always said she just wanted attention, and DJ should ignore her. Kathy washed and DJ dried. Kathy tossed her long reddish hair so her face was free and she could see DJ better. She said, "You going to be a writer when you grow up?" "Guess so." He wiped a plate and set it on the lower shelf of the cupboard. "What about you?" "I'm going to help sick people." "Like a nurse?" Maybe, or maybe I'll help sick animals, like a vet. Maybe I could even help that bear with the sore jaw if I was already a vet. DJ scoffed. People don't help bears. They shoot 'em. The girl spun around suddenly, so suddenly, that DJ almost dropped the plate. You'd shoot that old bear just because it's sick and old or something? DJ saw the color rising in her cheeks. He felt his own grow warm under her angry gaze. What's wrong with that? He demanded. Everything. What if it was your father? Would you shoot him? No. So why not do the same for a bear? If a bear's old or sick or whatever, it could be trapped safely. Have a vet treat it. When the bear's all well again, take it to a new place and turn it loose. That's what I'd do. DJ was really surprised at her spunk, but he wasn't going to let any girl make him feel wrong. He said, in the Bible, David the shepherd boy killed lions and bears. If the Bible says it's okay, then who are you to say any different? She dropped the dishcloth in a pan, placed both hands on her hips. Her bright blue eyes snapped like her voice. In those days, they didn't have any way of trapping and treating those animals. But today, we do. DJ tried not to lower his eyes. I read about a man named Grizzly Adams. He set up to trap grizzlies up along the Tumacolan and the Santias rivers not far from here. Kept some for pets, but that was maybe 100 years ago. Now we got black bears and, she interrupted, her voice firm, if I were a boy or a man, I'd catch that bear safely and let him go when he got well. DJ frowned. Lots of men are hunting that old outlaw. Some will use guns and some dogs. In fact, today we met a professional bear hunter who's come to town because the reward's so high now. That bear will die, Kathy. She turned to face him, her eyes bright with controlled emotion. Not if someone helps him. One boy couldn't do anything like that. He could if a man would help him. Somebody like my father. DJ faced Kathy. He won't hunt bears anymore. You made him quit. He would if it was for a good cause and not for killing. DJ lowered his eyes. He liked her spunk, but he didn't like feeling like she was winning the argument. He said, hey, I think I heard the dogs acting up. He released the 4 hounds from the back of the pickup and took them for a walk in the vacant field. When he put them back in the pickup, he reached for the hair puller. It slurped a big, wet tongue across DJ's cheek. It licked him. Blech. Hey, you cut that out, dog. I don't want you. I don't like you. Now, come on and take a walk. The ugly little mutt bounced around like a puppy, which really he still was. 10 months old, Boot had said. The hair puller jumped into DJ's arms. Hey, cut that out. He lowered the dog to the ground. The hair puller raced away in a big circle. He tucked himself so low his stubby tail almost seemed to be dragging the ground. Somebody laughed. DJ turned around. Pris was pointing at the mutt. Look at that, DJ. He's going to scrub his tail right off. He's cute. She stopped suddenly, her eyes settling on DJ's face. She cocked her head sideways. Funny, she said. What is it? He demanded, scowling at her. She shrugged. Oh, nothing. I was just thinking what it would be like if you were my brother. I'm not your brother and never will be. Don't be so sure, Mr. Smarty. I heard Mom talking with some of the ladies at church one day. They asked if she was going to marry your dad someday, and she said she was thinking about it. DJ felt his stomach jump. My dad won't ever marry again. Mom's the only wife he'll ever have. And just because she's dead don't mean he's ever going to remarry. I don't want my mother to marry your father either. So there. But, well, once I heard Mom tell your father you should have a collie like you want. And if she was your new mother, I bet she'd make your dad let you have a collie. DJ had been so mad, he was looking around for a dirt clot, remember what that is? Dried up piece of mud, to chuck at Pris. He wanted to throw it at her. But suddenly he stopped. He looked at her real hard. Your mom said that? Yep. And you know what Kathy said just now? DJ's managed to swallow and say casually, I don't care what she said. Then I won't tell you. Pris started for the house. DJ ran after her, the hair puller jumping up and whining beside him. What'd she say? Pris stopped, cocked her head, looked at him like a dog. She says she thinks you're kind of cute. DJ let out a squall like he'd burned himself on the hot stove. Ah! He bent over and picked up a pine cone. Pris ran screeching towards the house. The boy threw the pine cone, but it fell short. The mutt ran over and tried to pick it up, but the sharp points made him drop it. Dumb dog, DJ muttered. Yet he felt better than he had for days as he walked back towards the house. But he should have known the good feeling could not last. And that is the end of chapter 3. I think that was an interesting one. And I think that the new preacher might become a friend of DJ's. And I bet he'll tell him more stories about his bear hunting. What do you think? Well, tomorrow we'll read chapter 4, and it's called Surprise on the First Bear Hunt. And there's a picture of it. I wonder what that surprise will be tomorrow. Well, we'll have to wait until tomorrow. I just want to say, I hope you're enjoying this story. I know I always enjoy it. And I want to say I love you and God bless you. I hope you have a really good day or night. I don't know if you're watching this in the daytime or at night. And I want to pray for blessings on you. So I will talk to you. I will read the story to you again tomorrow. All right, good night.